Hey, welcome to Tabletop Skirmish Games. I'm Lee, and in this video I'll show you how I painted the Shroud Blade with contrast paints to a tabletop battle ready standard. Here's our Shroud Blade all painted up with the contrast paints, and in this video I'll go by step how I did each of the stages of the miniature, and that'll include how I used a wet blend with the two different colours to create this really cool effect on the cloak there. I'll put links in the description below to all the paints I used, and then you can find out everything you need if you wanted to replicate this technique and do this for your Khainite Shadowstalkers. In the video I'll mostly be using the contrast paints with a few different base paints as well, and the model's all primed with a Wraithbone Citadel colour spray and assembled with Citadel plastic glue. The brush I'm using is the Army Painter Wargame character brush. This video is a little bit quicker than the other Warband members I've painted, so if you want to see something a little bit slower time, then check out the Shroud Queen video. I'll put a link below. Right, let's get painting. So first I took some Gorilla Glue, and then I just added a little bit to the base of the figure, and then attached that to a piece of sprue. I'm calling this the Bjorn Kumar technique, and it's great to use with a painting handle, or as I've done here, because I'm painting a few at the same time, added some glue to a paint lid and fixed it on the top there, and that's nice and sturdy. Okay, our first paint is the Contrast Black Templar, and this is going to be for the boots and any areas of black leather on the miniature, and I'm putting it on quite thick. We're only going to need one coat of this contrast paint, and I'm starting and ending my brush strokes where I want most of the paint to build up and leave the darker shadows, and this black paint's really great for giving us a nice leather effect, so it's perfect for the boots and the arm guards here. So I'm really loading my brush up with paint here, and I'm also going over that little skull at the bottom because that's going to form part of the base. And now I'm just going to move on to the wrist straps here. I'm not being too careful for the wrist straps because I know I'm going to be blocking that flesh tone in with some base paint later on, but on all the other areas I am taking my time and being careful to keep it within the lines. Next we're on to some Basilicanum Grey, and this is a nice kind of contrast to that black, and I'll use this for all the material for the leggings. And you could use Black Templar for this, but I just wanted to break that colour up a little bit, and I think this Basilicanum Grey is a nice colour to use for that. I'm doing that same technique of loading my brush up and starting where I want most of the paint to build up in the recesses. Now it's Contrast Snakebite Leather, a really great paint, and we'll use this for all the leather parts like the belt and the kind of crop top that she wears. And this is a really nice paint that's going to give us some good depth, some nice shadows, but leave the raised areas highlighted to a nice level. And that's perfect for this tabletop battle ready standard that I'm going for here. And I'm being really careful where the two different colours of contrast paints are going to meet, but not worrying too much for the kind of stomach, the flesh area, because again I'm going to use a base coat on that and tidy it up later on. With this particular paint, it's a really nice colour, and you can be quite generous with it in the shadow areas because it dries really nicely, so don't be shy about putting a lot of paint in the shadows and underneath the cloak there. And also in a minute I'm going to do the handle for the blade, and I put quite a lot on that small area to make it really dark where the kind of fingers are casting a shadow on the handle. So there's quite a lot there in just that little space, and that's going to seep into the little recesses too, just as we want it to. Now we're going to take two paints, the Pterodon Turquoise and Shyish Purple, and we're going to open these both at the same time. And that's important because we're going to be doing a wet blend technique here, so we don't want to be like spending time trying to open the pots and getting ready. So it's really important to get that preparation in advance and have both paints open and ready to go, ready for the technique. For this section of the video I'm just going to slow it down, go in real time so you can see the wet blend actually happening as the video runs out. And I think that's really cool, just to show you how easy it is and how I think anyone with a little bit of practice could do this quite quickly. I mean, I tried it out on 3 or 4 of the miniatures that I didn't make videos for, just so I could get the technique down. So you definitely do have to try it out and practice it. But I found these two colours work so well together, and you'll see here in the video just how easily and how naturally they blend together to give us a really nice effect that doesn't take too long and doesn't require a lot of skill or years of practice. And that's why I love these contrast paints. I think it's almost like colouring in with a felt tip pen. You just block in the colours, be as neat as you can, and you can get some really nice effects quite quickly. And if you're at a beginner level like me with painting miniatures like this, I think you can get some nice results, and this helps build my confidence and gives me the confidence I need to try some other more advanced techniques and grow. But to get started, you can certainly get some miniatures on the table over a weekend and have a great time doing it. Okay, let's get back to it. So now we're just approaching the point where we're going to start to do this wet blend technique, and now I'm adding more and more of that turquoise to the miniature, and it's going to get quite thick as we start getting to the point where I want the two colours to blend. So I'm really starting to load the brush up now, and then you can see I'm wiping off a lot of the paint onto the miniature. So here we're going to get some little pools of paint, and that's going to be really thick, and it looks like a crazy amount going on, but this is what we want it to do. So I've added that turquoise, and then I've gone straight into the purple without cleaning my brush, and then you can see I've let them pool together, and I'm just mixing the two paints together on the miniature using the brush, and then going down with more purple, and then that colour's going to naturally fade from turquoise to purple, and you can see it already now. We've got a really nice fade going on. And while this paint is still wet, I'm going back into the turquoise now, and then I'm just mixing a little bit more of that on at the kind of upper end, more towards the turquoise colour on the cloak, and then I'm just pushing the paint into the little creases. And this particular miniature is perfect for this. It's got some really nice folds in the cloak, and it just suits the contrast paint so well. And then I've gone back to purple, and then I'm starting to add just purple now, and as I get further away from where I've blended it, this is just going to be purple paint now. And then I'm putting it all on quite thick again, even on these areas, because it is still going to pool and leave some nice highlights as well. So I'm putting it on quite thick, and this is a lovely deep purple, really nice, and this is certainly the one to use. I tried at first with Magos purple, and it just was too pale. It didn't work, and it just didn't look right. So when I moved on to the Shyish purple, it gave a much better effect. I was really happy with it, and it looks so nice against that turquoise. You can certainly get results like this, and even better with an airbrush if you've got one, and if you're really like skilled or good at painting with layers and shades, then you can do it that way. But I don't have an airbrush, and I don't have the skills yet, so for me, I was just really happy to be able to create this using the two contrast paints. And now I'm just doing underneath the cloak, and that's all going to be purple, and so I'm going quite heavy, and the closer I get to the model, I'm putting more and more paint, because that's going to be a deeper shadow. And here we go, it's still drying, it's still like wet there, and you can see there's a lot of paint, but you can also see the blend starting to take effect. It's really cool. So it's important to leave that area alone now once you've got it as you want it. Don't go back and try and play with it too much. But these little holes in the cloak start to fill with paint, so I'm just poking my brush through to get rid of that. And here we are, almost dry. That blend's come along really nicely, and it looks really natural, and you've seen it happen in just a few minutes. Now it's time to tidy things up a little bit, so I'm taking some ceramite white base paint, and I'm just mixed it with a tiny bit of water on my wet palette, and I'm just going to go over all the flesh areas and the areas that I haven't painted yet, where I've gone over it with the contrast paints and gone over the lines, so to speak. So I'm just going to cover that with white. This would be better to use a Wraithbone base paint, but I don't have one, so I'm just going with the white. On one of the previous models, I mixed the white with Raggarth flesh and made a tone like that, but I just found this works better doing it just white. When you add the wash later on, the flesh wash, it's going to work a lot better. So just stick with the simple white or the Wraithbone if you've got it. And we're nearly finished now, and then I'm just tidying up that arm. And you see I'm moving the model a lot, so making it easy for myself. Next we're going to take some Lead Belcher base paint, and this is going to go on all the silver parts of the weapons and any metal areas on the miniature. At this stage I'm being really careful to make sure not to go on to any of the other areas I've already painted, and at this stage, as things get more and more towards the end, just being more and more careful as I go. And again, I'm making it as easy as I can for myself, moving the model so I'm not moving myself. I can keep myself in a nice position and keep moving the model as I'm painting. Next we're going to do the gold parts, so I've got a 0.996 Vallejo gold, and you can use any gold for this, but I want a really bright gold, and this is the brightest one I have, so I'm using that Vallejo there, and I'm going over all these knee guards, which kind of look like a weapon. You want to be kneed in the face with that, and then I'm going to go on the little badge on the cloak as well, and make sure every little part gets covered in that nice gold. And this is really vibrant, and it's going to be great for these Khainite Shadowstalkers who are a bit bling and a bit more sparkly than some of the other miniatures. So we want a nice bright gold for those. Now I'm being extra careful because I don't want to get any of this on the cloak, because that'll spoil that whole wet blend technique we've already done. And again on the arm, because we've blocked that in with white, I don't want to make a mistake. But if I do, I'll go back with the white and make sure I tidy it up. Now we're going to go back to the Pterodon turquoise, and this is just going to be for the little tiny pouch that they carry. And so we're just going to put one coat on that, and that's going to be plenty to give that nice effect there. So one coat of Pterodon turquoise over the little pouch, and that bit's all done. Now we've got some Nuln oil, and this is a shade that we're going to use on the blades, on the silver parts here. And you could use a contrast paint for this. That works really great, like a Basilicanum grey or even that Templar black. But I'm going with the Nuln oil because I just want it to be quite a subtle shade on these blades here. I'm putting the shade on quite thick again, and that's going to go into the shadow areas and the recesses nicely, but it's going to leave the uppermost parts ready for a nice highlight later on. For the gold areas, we're going to take some Agorist Dunes contrast paint, and this is going to work like a shade, but it's going to give us a really nice deep gold colour and give us some nice shadows and shade. And it's going to be a really nice combination with that Vallejo gold. I've used Guilliman Flesh in the past, and that gives more of a dirty bronzy gold, and that works well. But again, for these Khainite Shadowstalkers, we want them to be nice and shiny and bling, so this is perfect for that. Just going over these little bits of gold on the handles there of the blade. Just be careful not to get any on the silver, because this is quite strong, and the Agorist Dunes will show up on any of the other paints. And here we go, we're getting there now, this is exciting, we're almost finished. So we're going to take some Contrast Medium and Guilliman Flesh, and we're going to mix 3 parts Contrast Medium to 1 part Guilliman Flesh, and this is going to give us our shade on the flesh tones. I didn't want to put the Guilliman Flesh straight on because it could be quite strong, and I want these to be like pale characters looming out of the shadows, and so I don't want them to have too human-like skin. Using that 3:1 ratio is going to be great for that. And I'll go back once this first one's dried and just put a tiny bit more in where the main features are, and anywhere I want to be a little bit darker, like here on the stomach. You want those areas where the belly button and just under the kind of top, you want that nicely covered and with a little bit of shadow. And here on the hands as well. This uppermost bit not so much, but when we spin it round in a second, we're going to put a little bit more underneath and where the fingers are meeting the blade, because that's going to be quite dark naturally. And then here we go in the face. I just want to get a bit more on the mouth and the eyes, and also where the cloak meets it. And I don't have to be too careful if I go over that cloak bit, because this is quite pale, but you know, still taking my time and just using the brush to push and pull where I want the paint to end up and where I want it to finish in those recesses for the darker shades. Now we're going to highlight our metals. So for that I'm going to use a 0.997 silver by Vallejo, and this is going to be for all the silver blades but also for the gold, any gold metals. And I'm just loading the brush up, and then I use the side of the brush on these long parts of the blade, and I just run the side of the brush along the sharpest points, and that just gives us a nice natural highlight. And you can be as bold as you like with this, depends how much of a highlight you want, and you can even do a couple of coats to get it really strong. I just use 1 coat, but I think I'll start doing 2 from now on, and I might even go back over these. After I've played with them a few times, I've noticed it does need to be a bit stronger once it's really dried. But this is great to use on the gold. On the previous model, I used a gold highlight because I wanted it to be more sparkly, but it kind of didn't work as I wanted it to, and it turns out, I think, that this silver is a much better highlight for gold if you want it particularly shiny. So I'm using the silver on these models, and I've done the same on the Shroud Queen as well. So I've used the silver to highlight the gold, and I really like the effect it gave, especially on those knee guards. It really brought them to life and made them really really shiny. So that was great. This is pretty much the end of the miniature being painted now. So I'm just going to take some Shyish Purple, and I used this on the bases I made previously, and this is just going to go over that skeleton skull there that's on the bottom attached to the foot, and then this is going to help it blend in with the base that I made. And so I'm just covering that with that Shyish Purple with a quick coat, and then once that's dried, I take my clippers, run it under the sprue, and then we just pop it off the paint top, and then that just leaves us with the sprue attached. And I do the same thing and make sure the clippers aren't touching any of the painted area, and just with a little snip, it'll just snap away. And because we use super glue, this comes away really easily like that. And here's the base I made previously, and I'll put a link in the description to a separate video on that. I made these bases so it would look like the miniatures are coming out of the shadow, and I just used black with a white like dry brush, and then a nice coat of that Shyest purple, and that's a real good combo for this effect. I used some Gorilla super glue to attach the miniature to the base, and if you want to see how this is done in more detail, I've also made a video on how to fix painted miniatures to painted bases. And here we go, here's our finished Shroud Blade, all ready for the tabletop, battle ready, and I was really happy with how this turned out with the contrast paints, especially that blend, how we did that wet blend to mix the two colours together. That was my favourite part of this whole painting experience. And let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments in the comments section below. It'd be great to hear from you. If you want to follow this guide, I'll put links to all the paints I use in the description below, and there'll be affiliate links, but they won't cost you anything. In fact, they can save you up to 20% with Element Games, and every sale made through an affiliate link, I get a small commission, and that's going to help me develop the channel and create much more content for Warcry. I really appreciate your support, as well as your feedback and comments on the previous videos I've done. I really appreciate it, so thanks so much for that. I really hope this video has been helpful, and if you like it, it'd be awesome if you hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to join me next time on Tabletop Skirmish Games.